I used to believe that hard work was the ultimate armor, especially for women like me who didn't come from much. I'm Rachel Tran, 37, and until 3 weeks ago, I was the lead systems architect at Solentra Grid Tech, the clean energy darling of Silicon Valley. For 6 straight years, I poured everything I had into developing a grid optimization software that now powers over 40 major municipalities across the country. My code reduced city energy costs by up to 60%, made headlines, won awards. I didn't just build a product, I helped build the reputation of that damn company. The former CEO, Howard Blaine, once called me the beating heart of Solentra. He meant it. He was one of the few who truly saw me, not just as a brilliant engineer, but as a person. When he retired, I should have seen the writing on the wall. But I was too busy fixing weekend bugs and dreaming of the day I might finally get a board seat. Then came Thomas Kincaid. He was young, polished, fresh off some Ivy League MBA, and had all the charisma of a politician and none of the substance. The kind of man who referred to coders as cost centers and got visibly annoyed if a woman corrected him in meetings. Still, I didn't expect what happened that Monday morning. He called me into the executive boardroom. Glass walls, ridiculous, views of San Jose, that sterile coldness that only expensive spaces can pull off. I thought maybe we were reviewing our next deployment phase, or perhaps, naively, a promotion. Instead, he slid a folder across the table with a corporate grin and said, "Rachel, you're brilliant. No one's questioning that, but we're restructuring to preserve capital. Your position is no longer sustainable." That word. Sustainable. Like I was some luxury they could no longer afford. I remember blinking, not speaking, because how do you react when your life's work gets erased with one HR buzzword? I was still trying to process it when 2 security guards came in. I wasn't allowed back to my workstation. They'd already revoked my credentials. My email? Locked. My drive access? Gone. All while he sat there smiling, thanking me for my contributions. As they walked me out, past people who used to high-five me in the cafeteria, I clutched a cardboard box, like some cliché. Inside it, a broken photo frame of my mom and me. I dropped it while packing too fast, hands shaking. But what Thomas didn't know, what none of them realized, was what else I'd packed in that box. And that was going to change everything. For a few days after getting fired, I didn't leave my apartment. I couldn't. I just sat there, in the silence, curtains drawn, phone off, staring at the cardboard box from Solentra still sitting by the door like a wound that wouldn't close. I kept replaying it. Thomas's smug smile, the guards, the way no one looked me in the eye as I walked out. It felt like everything I'd built had collapsed in seconds. But on day 4, I finally opened that box. At the bottom, beneath my notebooks and that shattered photo frame, was a manila folder I hadn't seen in years. I almost didn't recognize it. But when I pulled it out and unfolded the first page, my breath caught. It was the IP co-ownership agreement Howard Blaine had quietly handed me 2 years ago. I remembered the day vividly now. He'd called me into his office, no assistants, no legal team, and said, "I know how much of yourself you've poured into this. You deserve protection. You deserve credit." He made sure I had co-creator, rights over the software I built, the same software Solentra was still profiting from every single day. The same software Thomas had just fired me for budget reasons. My hands were shaking when I logged into my personal Git repository. The company had revoked my access to everything on their servers, but this was mine. What I saw made my jaw tighten. Every single deployment, every patch, every optimization module that Solentra had rolled out in the last 6 months still carried traces of my original code. Time-stamped, authored, tracked. The commits stretched back years. Midnight bug fixes, Sunday builds, Christmas Eve tweaks from my apartment floor while Thomas probably popped champagne in Napa with investors. They hadn't just stolen credit. They were still running my software, my invention, to keep their grid alive and their profits rolling. And the deeper I looked, the more damning it became. They'd taken my name off internal documentation, sure, but they couldn't erase the source. The original architecture was mine. The structure, the logic, the backbone. That was the moment it hit me. They didn't fire just another engineer. They fired the very woman who built their empire. And they had no idea I still held the one thing Thomas Kincaid couldn't buy, fake, or erase: proof. I didn't rage post. I didn't tweet some viral thread or blast Thomas's name across tech blogs. That would have been too easy, and frankly, too small. No, I wanted something bigger than public sympathy. I wanted leverage. So I printed the IP agreement, gathered my Git logs, source code timestamps, and deployment history, and walked into the sleek, leather-scented office of Helena Cordova, an IP attorney who once helped bring down a Fortune 100 over patent theft. She was older, sharp-eyed, and terrifying in the best way. After an hour of flipping through my documentation, she looked up and said, "Rachel, you own half the brain behind that empire, and they just kept running it without your consent? That's not just unethical, it's actionable." I nodded, but I wasn't ready to sue. Not yet. I told her my plan and watched her smile slowly grow. "You're not just playing defense," she said. "You're flipping the entire board." 2 weeks later, I boarded a red-eye to Geneva, Switzerland, under a fake company name, and met with the executive team of Novagrid Europe, Solentra's most bitter rival. They'd been locked out of the U.S. energy market for years, thanks to Solentra's aggressive lobbying and undercutting. I stepped into their conference room overlooking the snow-draped Alps and plugged in my laptop. What I showed them wasn't just code. It was the future. Real-time grid responsiveness, weather-adaptive distribution, predictive outage prevention. Their engineers were speechless. Then I dropped the bomb. Solentra no longer had legal rights to use it. I had documentation. I had the commits. I had the edge. They offered me $2.3 billion by the end of the day. Not for the code alone, but for exclusive licensing rights for the next 10 years. Solentra wouldn't just lose me. They'd lose everything they were built on. As I signed the draft agreement, I glanced out the window at the Alps. The same hands that were trembling over a cardboard box weeks ago had just signed a contract worth more than Thomas Kincaid's entire portfolio. And he didn't even know he was bleeding yet, but soon, he would. The news broke on a Thursday morning. Novagrid secures exclusive U.S. rights to revolutionary grid optimization software. My name wasn't in the headline, but the right people knew. Within hours, Solentra's stock started sliding like ice off a rooftop. By Friday, it was a full-blown landslide. Cities like Boston, Seattle, Phoenix, municipalities that had built their infrastructure on my code, began suspending contracts, pending legal clarification. Energy directors didn't want lawsuits. Investors didn't want exposure. And Thomas? He wanted control back, but he was already too late. The call came at 12:17 a.m., some blocked number I almost let go to voicemail. But curiosity got the better of me. I answered, didn't say a word. "Rachel?" His voice was raw, nothing like the smug exec who once told me I was no longer sustainable. He sounded small. "We need to talk," he said. "This is insane. You can't just do this. Name your price. Whatever you want, we can work something out." I stayed silent for a beat, just letting him hear his own desperation echo in the space between us. Finally, I said, slow and even, "I don't want your money, Thomas. I want you to feel what it's like to be erased, to build something with your soul, and watch someone else slap their name on it. I want you to wake up every morning knowing you destroyed your own empire, with your own arrogance." He stammered, "Rachel, be reasonable." I hung up. That was the last time I ever heard his voice. I didn't gloat. I didn't scream into the void. I just sat in my living room, staring out at the lights of San Jose and thought about how power shifts don't always happen in boardrooms. Sometimes they start in silence, in a woman's apartment, with her laptop glowing at 3 a.m., and her resolve sharper than ever. Thomas had fired me thinking I was disposable. Turns out, the only thing Solentra couldn't afford was me. The headlines faded. The lawyers moved on. Solentra's empire continued crumbling under its own weight, and I quietly stepped into the void it left behind. I didn't want a revenge tour. I wanted rebirth. So, with a portion of the Novagrid licensing deal, I founded RT Future Labs, named not after myself, but the version of me who used to code on a second-hand laptop in a cramped one-bedroom apartment, dreaming of something better. This wasn't another tech company chasing quarterly gains. It was a nonprofit research hub, committed to building sustainable energy solutions for underserved communities. We focused on the projects big corporations ignored because they didn't look profitable on spreadsheets: rural grid access, smart solar for low-income housing, disaster-resilient infrastructure. But more than the tech, it was about people. I built my team from the very trenches I'd once crawled through. Women passed over for promotion, immigrants with degrees no one in the valley had bothered to verify, engineers who'd been laid off for being too old, too different, too vocal. I didn't need perfect resumes. I needed grit. I gave them a lab, a mission, and most importantly, respect. Then came the email. Solentra's old R&D campus, the one I used to walk through every day, was being auctioned off. Their cash flow had collapsed. I didn't hesitate. I made an anonymous offer, just above market value. 2 weeks later, I had the deed. It felt poetic, owning the same building where I'd once been escorted out like a liability. Only this time, I walked in through the front doors as the owner. We tore down every corner office and replaced them with open workspaces. We painted over the sterile gray walls with color and light. Every meeting room was renamed after trailblazing women in science. We turned the old executive dining room into a childcare center for staff. No ping-pong tables, no beer fridges, just purpose. Real purpose. I didn't rebuild to prove anything to Thomas or the industry that tried to bury me. I rebuilt because I remembered how it felt to be unseen. And now, no one who walked through my doors would ever feel that way again. 8 months. That's how long it took for GridNova Lite, the new version of my software, rebuilt from the ground up with my team at RT Future Labs, to spread to over 30 cities across the U.S. From Chicago to Austin to Baltimore, municipalities were abandoning legacy systems and lining up for ours. It wasn't just more efficient, it was smarter, more secure, and designed with equity in mind. No backdoors, no vendor lock-ins, no shady licensing tricks. Just clean, transparent, revolutionary tech built by the very people who'd been dismissed, overlooked or underestimated for years. The press couldn't get enough of the story. They called me the woman who rewired a nation with a USB stick and a vengeance wrapped in grace. A little dramatic, maybe, but I didn't mind. My face ended up on Forbes. I gave a TED Talk in Vancouver titled, "Build Like No One's Watching Until They Can't Look Away." I was flown to Dubai for a global innovation summit where they introduced me as the disruptor who made her former CEO irrelevant. Poetic justice, maybe. But that was never the part that mattered most. What mattered were the emails. The messages I got almost daily, some long, some only a sentence or two, from girls named Sarah, Amina, Lucia, Min, high schoolers, college seniors, moms going back to school at 35. They told me they had always loved tech, but didn't see a place for themselves in it, until they saw what I did. One girl wrote, "They told me I was too ambitious for a girl in engineering. Now I use that ambition like fuel. You gave me permission." That's what hit me hardest. Not the awards, not the standing ovations. It was realizing that somewhere, along the way, I'd become the example I never had. And if nothing else came from all of this, if Gridnova failed tomorrow, if the world moved on, I'd still carry that with me like armor. I had cracked open a door, and the girls coming through, behind me, they weren't just walking in, they were about to light up the whole damn room. Last month, I went back to Cleveland, the city where everything started and where nothing ever came easy. It was early morning, cold wind whipping across the cemetery, hill as I stood alone in front of my mother's headstone. Sarah Tran. She believed in tomorrow. That's what the stone read. And it was true. My mom used to get up at 4 a.m. to clean office buildings she could never afford to work in, just so I could stay in school and save for a used laptop. She never saw me graduate from Stanford. She never saw me write a single line of the code that changed everything. But that morning, I stood there, hand pressed to the cold granite, and whispered, "I kept my promise, Mom. They tried to take everything, but I never let them have my mind or my integrity." And then I smiled because I knew what was coming next. Later that afternoon, I stood at the podium of RT Future Labs with cameras flashing and a room full of journalists, students, and community leaders. We announced the launch of the Rachel Tran Scholarship Fund, full rides for first-generation engineering students starting in Detroit and Phoenix. But the real moment that got me? The unveiling of the plaque out front, bronze, bold, permanent. It read, "For every girl told she was too smart, too bold, or too much, welcome home." That was it. That was everything. I didn't need another award. I didn't need to prove Thomas wrong one more time. This wasn't about him. It was about the world we're building now. One where talent isn't crushed under politics, and brilliance doesn't have to shrink itself to survive. If you've ever felt underestimated, like your worth was tied to a job title or someone else's approval, I see you, and you are not alone. Drop a comment if this story hit home. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for more stories of real power and resilience, and most of all, share this with someone who needs to be reminded. Your value is not up for negotiation, ever.